Yes, you can unmute and start. You have already unmuted. Please start. Dubey sir, you can start.
Okay. So good morning, friends. It's really good to be back again this Sunday. And we have Mr. S. Gopalan, who has very kindly agreed to speak before this group. Since Gopalanji has already spoken a few times, I'll give a very brief introduction, since most of us know him so well now. Mr. Gopalan is a chartered accountant, and while still working in the industry, it was his fortune to come into contact with Krishji and his stocks way back in 1980. He and his wife Sobha joined the Valley School as parents in 82 and as teachers in 1983. So he has been associated with K institutions for almost 4 decades now, and presently he lives in the Valley School and is associated with the study center. I want to extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Gopalan. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Gopalan is going to talk about a very interesting topic, death, a figment of imagination. With these words, I request Mr. Gopalan to please go ahead with the talk. Then you can take as long as you want, and then we'll have observations or question and answer session. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dubeyji. Namaste all. The title of this talk is somewhat provocative because the idea is to bring questioning from ourselves, not what somebody else has said about death. So this is an atypical and out of the ordinary exploration into the phenomena of death. It's logical, scientific, and is not based on any assumptions. In this talk, I'll bring in references from Krishnamurti, modern science, as well as our own individual experiences. There are numerous references available in other religious literature, but I am not bringing any of that into this talk. Now, as you all know, there is a Krishnamurti database which contains most of Krishnamurti's talks and writings. And if you search that database with death and dying, it brings about 16,000 entries. That is exceeded only by desire with 18,000 plus entries, and by fear with over 21,000 entries. If you were to search for the moon, you would get about 1,000 entries. And if you search for sunrise, you get between 100 and 200 entries. So why did Krishnamurti refer to death, desire, and fear so often in his talks as compared to the moon and the sunrise? Is it that there is precious little that can be done about the moon and sunrise, but everything is possible to be done to end death, desire, and fear? Why is this? Because it is within the capability of thought intellect to see its own limitations and therefore allow another instrument to act by stepping aside and not obstructing that instrument. And that instrument, which is available to every human being, is insight. But most of the time, the insight is obscured and obstructed by thought intellect rising. So can death be looked at from this perspective? Insight acts on its own, but insight can be assisted by asking the right question. On the other hand, a wrong question can obstruct the action of insight. And here is an example. In a Sanin talk in 1976, Krishnamurti said, quote, "I am confused. My mind is troubled, in conflict, broken up, fragmented, And that mind which is fragmented asks, is there a part of me which is clear, not fragmented? You follow? It is a wrong question. Of course, it is a wrong question, but we put that question, unquote. Now, why is this a wrong question? Is it not because the question is based on the assumption that the entity I, who is asking this question, is separate, independent of body mind, and is perpetual? The question doesn't allow for any doubt or questioning about the very existence of I itself. Therefore, it's very important to ask the right question that encourages insight. Now, the word death and its common meaning in the English language is end of life or ending, as it is said in the dictionary, has come to us from Western culture. And Western culture has originated from Western religion, which over the last 1500 years has primarily been the church dominated institutional viewpoint. We, the English speaking educated, are conditioned very deeply by Western thought and ideas of modern science. Although we understand that these ideas and thinking have their own limitations, we also see that this limitation prevents us from accessing or investigating ideas of other cultures. All ideas have their limitations, but they sometimes can give you perspectives from a different direction which one may not have thought of and can be a starting point for investigation. At the same time, although we are not able to accept ideas of any kind, we don't have our own clarity and perception. And clarity and perception is the entire foundation of Krishnamurti's message. And this becomes our biggest trap, that we can't accept any belief, doctrine, or vision of another. We don't see that our intellect comes in the way of insight and perception. And therefore, intellect becomes supreme and keeps us going around in circles, living upon words. There is a Hindi idiom which brings the essence of this very succinctly. Dhobi ka kutta na ghar ka na ghat ka. And that is really where I think we educated intellectuals get caught. But if we see that we are getting caught in this, then perhaps there is a different movement possible. So from this perspective, let us investigate death objectively and logically, going beyond the word. As stated earlier, death is considered to be the ending, but we don't ask ending of what? No, when we look at ourselves as human beings, very clearly, there are three distinct components in us. We've talked about this in the earlier talks also. There is a life energy, and so long as it is there, we say we are alive. Then there is the physical body, and then there is this field of thought, intellect, emotion. No, life energy cannot end because it is energy. Energy can have no end. So the next question comes, can the body die? Can the body end? Now, this is where we are stuck with our acceptance of modern science unquestioningly. Modern science classifies objects and living forms as animate and inanimate. Matter is considered to be inanimate until now. But 20th and 21st century developments in physics, quantum physics and Einstein, etc., have all shown that matter and energy are really interconvertible. They continuously interconvert. It's not even a one-time activity. We have the example of nuclear fission and fusion, where matter converts into energy. And we have the examples where photons collide and convert into matter. So this happens between matter and energy. There is continuous conversion. So matter is not independent of energy as we think it to be. And particle physics, we're getting more and more complicated to understand, but it essentially says the atom consists of a nucleus of protons and neutrons with electrons orbiting around. And these electrons are particles of energy. And the protons and neutrons themselves are now divided into 12 fundamental particles. And each of these particles at the subatomic level behaves sometimes like a wave and sometimes like a particle of matter. So they have the properties of both the wave and the energy. So when we say an atom of oxygen or carbon, what do we mean? We only mean it's a unique combinations of protons, neutrons, and electrons. So oxygen has, according to chemistry, has 8 protons, 8 neutrons, and 8 electrons. So if you put 8 electrons, 8 protons, and 8 neutrons in a particular format, you get oxygen. Therefore, the uniqueness of oxygen as an element is only in the arrangement of its energy particles. And all arrangement is memory. So can we then say, when energy is trapped in the framework of memory, the result is matter? Now, classification of animate and inanimate is only then explaining how far that energy is manifested externally. A living human being or an animal or an insect manifests a greater degree of this energy than does a rock, because the rock we call inanimate. So can matter then ever die, or it can only become energy, which is just a change of form? Again, if you look at it from another perspective, when the human body dies, it decomposes into what? Into carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and the other minerals that it has been built from. This combination of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and other minerals was never alive on its own. So what is there to die for the body? This comes to the third component of the human being, which is thought, intellect, and emotion. Can it die? Now, one of the things that Krishnamurti pointed out again and again is intelligence means reading between the lines. See what is the real meaning and discover that for yourself. And in a talk in 1982, he said, quote, "Death is the ending of everything. My pleasure, my memory, my experience, my attachments, ideals, beliefs, all that ends. That's what you are. That ends. But we don't like the ending," unquote. Now, this my pleasure, my memory, my experience, my attachments, ideals, beliefs, when we say all that ends, what does that really mean? All these are in my mind. They can end at death only if they are stored in the body brain that dies. But are they stored in the individual brain? In an earlier talk, Krishnamurti had said, our consciousness is made up of its content. Therefore, my pleasure, my memory, my experience, my attachments, ideals, beliefs must be part of consciousness. They are not outside of consciousness. So what is this consciousness? In a talk in 1966 at Mumbai, he said, quote, "But thought is the result of time, and time is this consciousness. Whatever you do within the field of this consciousness, sorrow can never end," unquote. So this brings in the concept of time. Now we know time by the sun, time by the clock, time to learn a language or a skill, time to go from one place to another, and also the psychological time of gradually becoming less and less violent. And we conveniently classify this as time inward and time outward. And in most of our discussions, we say time outside is not a problem. We are only worried about psychological time because that's an illusion. But in that argument, we miss a very fundamental point. The common element in all forms of time, whether it is inward time or outward time, is that there has to be a thought and a thinker. Without thought and the thinker, time is not inner or outer. So when Krishnamurti says, your consciousness is not yours, it is the common ground on which all human beings stand and share. If that consciousness is not individual, then can that memory be stored in the individual brain? And therefore the question arises, does consciousness end upon the death of the body? Now let us examine the actual process of death, especially from the scientific and medical perspective. What are the conditions to determine that death has happened? In present modern day medicine, there are three conditions. First condition is there should be no breathing. Second condition is there should be no heartbeat and circulation. And because we have brought in a situation where both the breathing and the circulation are managed by machines on a life support system, there is also a third category where we say when the brain stem is no more active, then it is brain dead. So we have these three definitions. No breathing, no heartbeat implies that breathing and heartbeat are continuing activities. But are they continuing activities? We have just assumed it. If you look at breathing, it's a cycle. There is an in-breath, there is an out-breath, and there is a pause. Every in-breath must result in an out-breath because there is a pressure differential between the inside the body and outside the body. So you don't have to do anything. If you have breathed in, you have to breathe out. But once you have breathed out, what makes the person take the next breath? That is the act of that life force in us. So the next breath can happen only if the life force is present and the instruction goes from the brain to the muscles to take in the next in-breath. So this is the beauty of it. If you have ever watched a person take his last breath, only after the breath has stopped do you realize that that was the last breath. You can't know it was the last breath when it is happening. It is after the event you can say, oh, that was the last breath. Doesn't that imply that that pause which happens after every breath before the next in-breath is death? If the next breath happens, we say the person continues to live. If the next breath doesn't take place, we say death has taken place. So breathing is not a continuous activity. Now let's look at the second condition of heartbeat and circulation. The heart is essentially a pump, which is what causes the blood to circulate in the body. And most of you would know that there are basically two kinds of pumps. One is a centrifugal pump, which operates by rotation. As long as the pump is rotating, there is activity of pumping going on continuously. The other is the reciprocal pump, like a bicycle pump. It draws in air and then it pumps it out, right? It has a stroke, a two-stroke, you can say. The heart is very similar to this reciprocal pump. It's got the relaxing stage, which is called in medical term the diastole, and then it has the contracting stage, which is called the systole. And that's what we measure in a heart pressure, blood pressure. If we look at an ECG graph, the entire heartbeat cycle of both the systole and the diastole takes 0.8 seconds. That means about 12 beats per minute. If the heartbeat is higher, then the time is even less. But after every systole, a diastole, which is that relaxing, the pacemaker cells in the body, in the heart, have to give the signal, the pulse. Only then does the heart contract and the diastole take place. And that's why when there are problems with the natural pacemaker, they insert a pacemaker. So between every systole and diastole, there is a gap. The gap is 2 milliseconds, but it's still there. There is a gap of 2 milliseconds. After that gap, if the diastole doesn't happen, heartbeat has stopped. But if the diastole happens, then life continues. So just like breathing, in every heartbeat, there is a gap, and that gap is there. Now, if you look at the number of breath cycles in a life of 60 years, you can do a calculation. My calculation comes to about 500 million. 500 million breathing cycles in a life of 60 years means 500 million times I have died in those 60 years. And similarly, the heart beats 5 times as much, 2.5 billion in 60 years, which means 2.5 billion times I have died in those 60 years. From this perspective, Krishnamurti's statement, death is part of living, it is not separate, from very clear. It is thought which has separated living from dying. Then I would ask, is it correct to say that the body dies, or is a more precise way of saying life energy has withdrawn? Which is more precise and describes actually what happens? If matter cannot die, and if memory is not necessarily in the body brain, and therefore thought cannot die, and energy itself cannot die, is not this process of death simply a withdrawal of energy? And this is supported by medical texts. They point out that skin grafts can be made up to 24 hours after the body dies. Bone grafts can be made up to 48 hours after the body dies. Arterial grafts can be made up to 72 hours after the body dies. Now, here I would like to bring in a simile from the day-to-day common world. When you are flying in an aircraft, you're flying at a height of about 35,000 feet, and you have to land and come to the ground. That process is not done in an instant. It's a process. About 30 minutes before you reach the destination and 250 kilometers before, the plane starts a descent, a gradual descent. And then when it approaches the airport, there is a very steep descent and it touches down on the runway. And then you taxi on the runway and come to the parking slot until you come to a complete halt. All these three is the process of the aircraft landing. It's a process. Is human withdrawal of life energy a process, a similar process? Does it start much before the event of what we actually call death? In the Mary Lutiens's biography, The Open Door, there is an interesting conversation that is recorded. I'll just read it out. Quote, on his way to London a few days later, he told Mary, while they were waiting on the station platform at Petersfield, that Scott had asked him how long he was going to live. He had answered that he did know but would not tell him. Do you really know? Mary asked. K, I think I know. I have intimations. And Mary, are you willing to tell me? K, no, that would not be right. I can't tell anyone. And he seems to have repeated the same thing to Mary Lutiens as well as to Scott, because they both have recorded this. So, is it only a person like Krishnamurti who can have an intimation 2 years earlier? Because later in that conversation, when she asked him, when did you get to know? He said, I've known for 2 or 3 years. So 2 or 3 years before 1986, he knew that death was coming and he knew the date. He knew when, but he said, I can't talk about it. Is that then a possibility that anybody can have such an intimation? Because it's a process. And the descent has to start much before the actual event of death. Now, therefore, this raises another question. Is there really continuity in living? We have seen that breathing and heartbeat are discrete, separate events. It is our thought intellect which strings them together and then says, this is continuity. I have been alive for 71 years. That is an invention of thought. So, is death then not a figment of imagination? Now, in the sixth public talk in Madras in 1978-79, that was Krishnamurti ended with a very powerful passage on death. I'll just read that out. Quote, Sir, our daily life is like a vast river. Watch it, like a vast river. And the whole human being is like that, in which there is all these complexities, problems, pain, sorrow, anxiety. Everything is that river of which we are a part. When the part dies, the stream goes on. The manifestation of the stream is you, with your name, with your quality, and so on. But you are still part of that stream. Are you getting this? Are you following, sir? Part of the stream. And we are saying the ending of that stream, you follow? Moving totally away from that stream, never belonging to that stream, because that stream is conflict, confusion, pain, attachment, detachment, or what is right, what is, you follow? This battle that goes on within one. So we are saying, while you are living, conscious, alive, full of your mischief, your activities, all that, see that the ending of something voluntarily, not with a motive, ending voluntarily attachment is the beginning of something totally new. You got it? Because the I, the me, is a continuity. The I has been not only genetically for millennia handed down, generation after, it is a continuity, and that which is continuous is mechanical. There's nothing new in it, unquote. So this ending of that stream, moving totally away from that stream, never belongings to that stream. What is this? What does it imply? In many of In every public talk, in fact, Krishnamurti invariably emphasized the importance of looking, listening, observing. In looking, listening, observing, there is only perception. Thought is not up and active with its imagination. It is an instant later when the compulsiveness to express, to analyze, all that happens, that thought arises. And this looking, listening, observation happens with every sense impulse that we get. And again, if you do a calculation, that comes to a couple of million in a day. So a million times a day, we are in that state of perception for an instant. And the next instant, we are back in thought. So we seem to be shuttling between the two. So when we are in that instant of perception, we don't think about death. Death is, its idea is not even there. But when we come into that world of thinking, then we say, now what do we do about that state? So it becomes an intellectual thing. Isn't it only in the intellect? Therefore, I am asking, isn't death only in the imagination? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Thanks a lot. You have brought a very difficult topic to a sudden close, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions. I want to just mention something, the way we know death is the end of the physical body. And every religion has defined death in their own way. For example, in the Indian tradition, it's just conversion of one form to the other form. And at one place, I remember a talk I'm going to quote right now, where Krishnaji says is that death is something which can't be known. So I don't know whether it's imagination or not, but I would like to read this. It's a 1956 talk Krishnaji gave in Brussels. He says, can we know and understand the full meaning of death? That is, can the mind be completely nothing with no residue of the past? Whether that is possible or not is something we can inquire into, search out diligently, vigorously, work hard to find out. But if the mind merely clings to what it calls living, which is suffering the whole process of accumulation, and tries to avoid the other, then it knows neither life nor death. So the problem is to free the mind from the known, from all the things it has gathered, acquired, experienced, so that it is made innocent and can therefore understand that which is death, the unknowable. Unquote. I'll end here, and I'm sure there are people who want to make comments. Harshad Bhai, for one, please, sir, go ahead. Unmute yourself. Harshad Bhai. Unmute.
Yeah, are you able to hear?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Gopalan sir and Dubeji. I want to say 2 or 3 things. One is in the last year of Ramakrishna's life, he was suffering from cancer, and Dr. Sarkar had come to cure Ramakrishna. And Dr. Sarkar was very, very scientific-minded person, and he saw that Ramakrishna was going into Samadhi. At that time, Dr. Sarkar came to close to Ramakrishna and kept a mirror near his nose to find out whether he was breathing or not. And Ramakrishna was not breathing. There was no heartbeat also. And Ramakrishna remained in that state for a long period. So it was like a physical death. Similarly, Raman Maharshi, when he was 17 years old, he had this experience of death. but it was at a psychological plane. But even then, that experience, psychological experience of death, made him free from fear and gave him the direction to his future life. And then when he was in Ramanashram, and one day he died physically also, and he could see the color of the skin changing, and he was outside the body, and he was looking at his body, and Raman Maharshi's friend was crying because he thought that Ramana has died. But after some time, the body came back to life again. So it seems that there is this death is a mystery, and I agree with Dubeji that why we are afraid of death, it is because we get attached to the known, and we are attached to our family or property, money, and we don't want to lose, because death means leaving everything. And so death is frightening because it is unknown and we are attached to the known. And one thing I feel that why we are keep on thinking, our mind, wherever we live, whichever age or whichever country, whichever race, everyone is thinking. And if the mind comes to a stop, then a person is very, very uncomfortable, doesn't want to die, because the death of a thought, thinking, is like the unknown, and it is very, very frightening for most people. So the mind being silent is very frightening. But that is the real freedom. The real freedom is when the mind is very, very silent. There is no sense of I, psychological I. The body physically may be alive. So it means to me that the freedom is very, very frightening. And that is why we don't want freedom. The freedom from this I, freedom from the attachment, all the things which we have gathered. And so we keep on thinking, and in thinking, we feel that we are alive. Okay, I have said enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Arshad bhai. Thank you. We have a question coming from Mr. Shankar Narayanan. Please unmute yourself and ask. Unmute.
Namaste, sir. Namaste. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Gopalan, sir, just a small thing, clarification needed. You had mentioned that upon death, there is life energy that withdraws. Life energy has withdrawn is what we see as death. But you had also mentioned that energy through a memory is what is manifesting as matter. Energy through memory is what is manifesting as matter. So, by death, isn't it correlating these two? Possibly it's just energy operating as some other memory, not as what we see as life. So there is only energy, but when we see activity and everything happening like heartbeat or all that, we say life energy, but it's just the energy. Possibly it's not withdrawing of any energy, but just that the energy operates through some other memory, or not at all. I mean, is this understanding?
Yeah, you're right. See, when I said withdraw from memory, what I meant is that why does our thought arise? What makes thought arise? Perception happens when sensations reach the brain. why does thought arise? What is the motivator for that? At least my understanding as I see it is, it seems inevitable. You see, when electricity flows through any wire, a magnetic field comes around that wire. Nobody asked for magnetic field to come, but it rises. So it seems that when the memories are illuminated with that life energy, it's inevitable that thought will arise. Now, this raises a deeper question, which I think perhaps doesn't have an answer at the level of thought. Why does life energy, which is complete in itself, give rise to this limited human being? It seems that life energy can only understand itself in the duality. This is the famous example given by Sears. Sugar can't taste its own sweetness. You have to come into a body to taste that sweetness. But I still have this question. Why does the sugar want to taste its sweetness? It's complete. But I think that question will not be answered at the level of intellect.
Sir, again, this points to something where Krishnaji has also pointed out. Is there an action without motive? I think that gives a sort of a direction to what you are pointing to also. Why is a sugar sweet at all, or why is it so? And tradition has somehow approached it through something called Maya. It's like it's anadi, like there is no start or end to it. Like, so as you said, when electricity flows, there is a magnetic field that is created. So when energy flows through a memory, which we call as thought, possibly it's like that magnetic that you are pointing to, sir. I mean, I don't know whether this.
Yes, you see, the problem with these questions which Krishnamurti raises, is it possible that there is no motive? That it can't be approached positively. I can only be watchful about what is the motive in me. I can't posit what is that state where there is no motive. And this is where our conditioning is extremely deep. I don't know if you have ever caught some rats in a trap. When you take that trap and open the trap outside, the rat doesn't want to go. It feels safe inside that trap. It would rather not go outside that unknown world, but it's safe here. We seem to be the same. And isn't that the cause of all our apprehension? I know what I am with all its limitations. This is what I am. My leg is hobbled. I have this problem. I have only this pain, but I know this. If I let this go, what will be there? Therefore, I'd rather hold on to this than let go. So I can't say what is that state where there is no motive. I can only see I am caught in motive. So I can only, that's that negative approach, which seems the only way to go about it.
Yeah, yes, sir. Because K also points out, like, fear is losing the known rather the unknown.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I say something?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Yeah, neither memory nor energy can be seen. And we even don't know where the memory is stored, whether it is in the brain or it is somewhere else. So when we say that when life energy enters into memory, thinking arises, but I feel that it is the thinking which is saying that memory plus life energy is thinking. So I don't think that we really know what is thought, where memory is stored, whether life energy enters into it and gives rise to thought, are all speculation. It seems to me. All we can see is that some words, some sentences comes in our mind, and then we say a thought has come. That is what I feel. Because non-verbal, many things are very, very non-verbal here.
Thank
Okay,
you. Thank you.
finish.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Parekh, but just one response to that. See,
Yeah.
it is our observation that when we are in deep sleep, there is no thought happening in the state of deep sleep. But when we wake up, what seems to begin is I, because then I say, I slept last night and I have woken up. So it seems that somewhere in that state of working, it is that sense of I which rises first. And that is the entire foundation on which our entire world that we know, that we talk about, is built.
Yeah,
Now,
but
what makes
this
that
sense
I
of,
rise?
yeah, I can tell you what Krishnaji says, and my own experience is that the thinking arises first, and from thinking, this thinker, I arises. So thought is more basic than the thinker or the sense of I.
Yeah, but I would like to question that. Can there be thinking without a thinker? Or thinking implies there has to be a thinker. It is not thinking arises and that is creating the thinker, but thinker is a process which arises.
I tend to agree to that. I tend to agree. We have Ravi from Uttarkashi. Please go ahead, ask your question.
One question arises from your discussion. When I wake up in the morning, mostly I am disoriented. I do not know I am the thinker or I am thinking. There are thoughts only. So thoughts arise first, then thinker comes in. That is my first observation. And second, in death of natural death of process, you have said that there is a process start before natural death. But in case of accident or murder, that process start much before or it accidentally happens. That's the second question. And third, appreciation, not to empower your ego, but to share my happiness that this talk was very good. And first time I'm listening to a person who is from commerce background, CA background, and talking about physics and biology. It was really good. Thank you.
I don't have the answers to your questions. I mean, these are questions which will remain with us. I think it doesn't matter which background we come, no specialization is going to give us the answers to these questions. But it seems to me that if we slow down, this was a challenge posed by one teacher. It's worth trying because it never ends. What is the last thought that you have before you fall asleep? And what is the first thought that you have when you arise? Now, generally, it's very difficult to be aware of what is the last thought that you had before you fall asleep, because you only realize later that you fell asleep. And it's the same way with the rising, but it points to a certain state of attentivity. And I think if one is attentive, you get an intimation of it. So it has to be experienced.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other question? Yes, Pradeep ji, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Gopalanji and others also, I want to say that for me, the understanding of death is incomplete without understanding of dream state. To me, the moment I wake up from the dream, the awake Pradeep wakes up, the dreamer Pradeep is dead. That word is a very different word, and this word, again, with its hopes, aspiration, desires, is a different word. So, in that sense, every day Pradeep wakes up and the dreamer Pradeep dies, and so this death and life is a repetitive cyclical process. So that's one perspective that I wish to bring. And the second, which is a very simple one, is that dying while living. The understanding that comes to Pradeep is that there is the moment there's a timelessness part of the consciousness. The I merges in that, which anyone can actually. I, because I is just an illusion and a concept and a thought. So the timelessness part is always, nothing ever happens to it. That the time implies change. You said something about time. I don't know, thought and thinker and thought, but to me, time is change. And the moment there's a one changeless aspect in me, the awareness, the choiceless awareness, the changeless part. The moment this I, etc., vanish, this choiceless awareness is there. The timeless part is there. There is no I there. So that is a state of death. So I tell you, from dream and this, how they are connected. So just as I wake up from the dream and nothing ever happens to me, whatever happened to me in the dream, I'm not affected by what happened to me in the dream. Even the tiger might have, pounced on me or whatever may have happened. But when I wake up, oh, I get, thank God, nothing ever happened to me. Similarly, this realization that, there's a timelessness element, which is actually the me. You can't call it me or whatever. So nothing ever happens to it. So death comes, will go, memory crashes, but nothing ever happens to me. So that is the most liberating understanding. So dying while, that is what I understand as dying while living. So they are, the two are connected. So that is the liberation for Pradeep. So there is no Pradeep, nothing, timelessness, nothing ever happens to me. Jo ho jaye, that's a sahaj avastha. Whatever may happen, no desire, nothing, whatever is coming is fine. So that is the ultimate liberation and deathlessness and beyond death. So this is my psychological or spiritual understanding of how I experienced it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to ask in that, this conversation that we are having now, how do we know this is not a dream?
It is
We
a
can-
dream, sir. It is a dream.
Exactly.
It is a dream, 100% dream.
Exactly. But in the state that we are in, can we understand it's a dream? Or only
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
get out of the state, we understand it is as a dream?
So you see, there is a state called half awake, half asleep. So sometimes you say, okay, I was dreaming. Sometimes so you are in that state. Then you know, okay, this is a dream. So in that state, when you are alternating between this and that, so you know this is a dream.
But the other thing that I'm asking is, this is what really is I find very intriguing. In every breath, there is an ending. In every heartbeat, there is an ending. But the maya of this power of thought seems to be so much that we are not able to pause there. Why do we have to carry that memory and again work on it? What? It seems to have a power of its own. It's as if that. But
That's not the power. Yeah.
But however
the power is
powerful
of the
it is,
feeling.
yeah, however powerful that feeling, in that moment of attention, all that power is dissolved.
Yes.
Therefore, it seems to point out that, look, can there be that quality of attentiveness in every moment, not by choice?
But okay, let me tell you now, who's trying to be attentive? The moment there is someone trying to be attentive, this becomes the paradox that you can't be attentive. So this is the paradox which prevents people from getting into this state.
Yeah. This is what I mean, is the charcha we get caught into. I am not getting into that. Who is being attentive? I'm just saying we all have the experience many, many times every day of being in the state of attention.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
It is only when we come out of that state that the thought arises and then we express. It seems to be a continuous, composite, integrated movement, but it's not. And if there is that watchfulness, one can see that actually there is a moment that is that.
This is explained by the word Maya. It is a hypnosis. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, we can. There's a Mr. C. Rajendran. He has a question from Mr. Gopalan. Are not dreams a continuity of movement of thoughts in sleep? Would you like to comment on this?
Sir, very clearly, dreams are from our thoughts. But the way we live our life now, that is also from our thoughts, because 99% of the time we are living in our thought world. So how is this as a dream different from that which I called a dream? When I wake up, I say that was a dream. But while we are in that state, can we say it is a dream or it is attention? Can we ever say that it is a state of attention?
Thank you. I think Mr. Shankar Narayanan wants to say something. Yes, unmute yourself, sir. Unmute.
Yes, sir. On this dream part, there is a interesting thing in our tradition in Yoga Vasishta. So where normally we see Jagrata, Swapna, Shushupti. I mean, wakeful, Swapna as in dream, and Shushupti is deep sleep. So in Yoga Vasishta, there is a pointer that there is only dream. Either it's a wakeful dream or sleepful dream. Either you there is a wakeful dream or a sleepful dream. So there was an iteration. So three, at least from three, it became two. Like as I just wanted to share. From Jagrata, Swapna, Shushupti, there was only Swapna, wakeful dream or sleepful dream. Like.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Vijay from, please unmute yourself, Vijay, and ask your question. Unmute. Yeah.
Namaste. Gopalanji, I just wanted to know if you can expand a little bit on ending of time, whether it meets the topic of the day.
See, the topic of the day is death a figment of imagination? Now, when we say time, particularly in the Krishnamurti circles, we talk of time by the sun, time by the clock. We talk of time to go from one place to another, time to learn a language. And we say all that time is necessary. That's natural. There's no problem with that. The problem with time comes when I say I am going to be less and less violent every day. But for any time to come, there has to be the thinker who is the reference point for measurement. Without a reference point, can there be time? Therefore, time and thought are integral. Where there is thought, there is time. Where there is time, there is thought. Or time is thought and thought is time. And therefore, when thought, how does thought work? One, it refers to the memory that we have, and then it makes a projection. That projection can be an idea, it can be imagination, it can be analysis. All these are projections. So thought can only work between recognition and projection, recognition and imagination. Is there a third dimension where thinking can happen? The movement of thinking is only recognition, projection. And therefore, in that projection comes this imagination of this will end, and that is death. If there is no thinker, which is what happens when we are in deep sleep, where is the problem with living or dying?
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Prashun Jain has a question. Would you unmute yourself, sir, and then ask? Mr. Prashun Jain.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for allowing me to post the question. I was just thinking about what we were talking about, and I was also recently reading the book called Homo Deus from Yuval Noah Harari, where he talks about it might definitely be possible for technology and genetics to reach a place where our bodies can be refreshed every few years, and so-called bodies and our memories can live indefinite. Now, when, let's say, human beings will face such a scenario where you can actually live for a far longer time period and death will not be the escape, in that sense, to me, Krishnamurti's, I think my question would be this: how do you even live in that scenario when your memories and your body lives forever? Isn't it that then you have to necessarily die, like your memories, your hate, your past memories, whatever interactions you might have, you needed to die every single moment or every single day. Otherwise, it will almost become impossible to live.
Precisely. There was a professor who put this very nicely some years ago. He said, see, you can't stop the march of technology, right? The transplant industry is at this point, it is going to develop from your own body stem cells at birth. They are going to prepare copies of all your organs, and you will have a little chip implanted in you, which you will not know, but the hospital will know that so-and-so body part needs replacement. So you will get a message and your heart will be replaced from your own heart, which has been prepared. No problems of throwing it out because it's your own body part. So he said, death of the body is not going to be a problem. The problem is going to be, what are you going to do with your living, with all that accumulated memory that you are sitting on? So what you said is absolutely right. Our living becomes a burden when we accumulate all our memories. You see, this is the contradiction we live with. We need memory, otherwise we can't communicate. We need memory, otherwise we can't find our house. So we need memory there. But with that memory, we have stored a whole lot of things connected with our fears and our ambitions and our desire. And we don't want to let that go. And that is the source of all our conflict or pain. So that is why again and again you see in the messages, death is a release, right? The body is the limitation. Death is a release. So why is death a release? Why do we have to wait for death at the age of 70 years for it to be a release? You have that option in every heartbeat, in every breath. Who says that you carry your fears and your desires and all that? You decide to do it. That freedom, that empowerment has already been made. It's up to us to do it. So we always have the opportunity to be free. And here I didn't want to bring in others, but since so many have done it, let me do it too. Somebody asked Ramana Maharshi this question. Ramana Maharshi had said, every single act that is going to take place in your life is already foretold. So this person asked the Maharishi, does that mean I have no freedom? He says, you have the freedom at every instant to understand you are not that. And I think understanding that is the key.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well said. Yes, Clemis has a question. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my question. I came in a bit late, but anyhow, I would like to comment on this question about technology and what is going to happen when the body becomes younger and we don't have to die. The physical body does not have to die. See, I feel that may be a possibility, but there is one problem that normally technology doesn't count with, which is nature. So we may be able to do that, but we don't know how these bodies are going to react to that. Right now, we have all the situation of the pandemic and we have lots of technology already. Anyhow, this did not stop things to happen and the pandemic to linger on for 2 years already. So we don't really know how those things are going to, let's say, backfire to human beings. We look at it in a very positive way, thinking that it will be just like that and nothing else will happen. I'm not so sure about that, because my feeling is that nature is much more intelligent than whatever we can create or invent. But about this situation of dying, see, the problem of dying is not about the physical body dying or not dying. The problem is that we don't want to die. We may be 90 years old, not come out of a bed, be completely, inactive and all that, but still, you see that happening all the time. And people are not ready to let go. So we are not ready to let go. So that is the real problem. And that is why we are creating all this technology to keep the body going always, because we are not ready to let go. So instead of getting ready to let go, we are getting ready to hold on more and more and more for longer with bodies that can be refreshed or whatever. So I think that the real question is, and then I really don't think, because we will be able to be having a body for 200 years, 300 years, that we will let go our memories. I don't think so. It will just accumulate and we will become just crazy people, more than we are already. That's all. because letting go is not so easy. And nature, in fact, is helping us, is saying, you have no choice. Now you have to let go, that the body goes. So that's how I feel about this whole thing. And technology is good, of course, but it is only good and does good if we are wise enough to use it and not be used by it.
Yes, but you see, I think the really valuable insight which Krishnamurti has thrown up is to point out that the stream of consciousness is going to continue. And the individual is only the manifestation of that. So it's not a question of whether I am going to die or I am going to be reborn, but can I end something in myself? And I think that is the key, because it seems the human being is the only one who has the opportunity to do this. Can an animal consciously do this ending? I think somewhere we have to understand what is the place and value of this intellect that we have. We are using it in different ways. But it seems that unless you use, when we say you end a motive, can you end that motive without using that thought intellect? So that's the opportunity. And that is not ending it for myself. You're ending something of that stream.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. We have Mr. Raj Shekhar now. Please unmute yourself. Mr. Raj Shekhar, unmute. Yeah.
Sir, we are talking of extending the body and living. Yes, I also read somewhere this type of research is going on. But if you come to astronomy, the scientists are telling every day or every few minutes or every second even, they say some of the solar system is born and some is vanishing. If that is the case, when our solar system is going to vanish, we don't know. This is what the nature. Clemens has said, yes, the nature, what action it is going to take place, we don't know. We never expected pandemic will come, when it will go, similar things. These are all I thinking. I think for simple living, a person who lives, you never ask any question, what is living? Only we intellectuals go and do all these type of debates. Of course, we have that zeal to do it, but still I think it is all anyway, sir, that's not. I just wanted to share my opinion on this.
Thank you.
What you said is absolutely
I want
right.
to appreciate, sir, I want to appreciate Mr. Gopalan has brought a very, very, very tough subject and it is very difficult to understand even. Thank you, sir. Very nice discussion.
No, sir. Only one point I wanted to make. I think the human being has an opportunity which is unique. Other living creatures don't seem to have that. And unfortunately, in the living that we have, which is because of the way we live, because of the way our education runs, we never ask these questions. Is it possible to end fear? Is it possible to end sorrow? Now, this is not a burning question for anybody. And right through our younger days, through education, we don't ask this question. Through our work life, we don't ask this question. Maybe we start asking this question after retirement, when it's, major part of life is already over, the energy is over. Is there a human opportunity that if you ask this question, it is possible to end fear and sorrow? I think so. It is the intellectual discussion or exploration, as you call it, has value if we are exploring these questions for ourselves. And I think that's a question one has to live with.
I totally agree. I think it has to start from the intellectual understanding. Then only one can go deeper. Yes, Mr. Shankar Narayanan, please unmute yourself and then Anandji.
Yes, Gopalan sir, you were mentioning about this word count, not about death, fear, and all that. Look at the number of times it has been used. And similarly, it's a paradox like in Rig Veda, There is a sukta called Yama Sukta, which comes as the 135th sukta in the 10th mandala. And strangely, like how you pointed out, Yama's thing is again and again, he is addressing the person as Kumara, as youth. And he points to one thing very clearly. He says, Achakra, a chariot without a wheel. That's where the Kumara is, a chariot without a wheel. So possibly that is pointing to something like an action without motive or something. I mean, again, that's coming in Yama Sukta and pointing to Kumara. This word comes again and again in that Sukta. And it's the Yama Sukta. That's a paradox. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Anandji, please go ahead.
So my question is, when I say I must end sorrow and suffering and fear, does life exist without sorrow, suffering, and fear? Life means that. So when I say end, what does it mean? And the other thing is, when I'm bringing the unknown, I am the known. How is it possible for the known to bring in that which is unknown? How do I understand that is the question, sir? There are only two questions. That's about all.
So the first thing is, I don't think we are suggesting that I want to end fear. I is the source of fear. The I is the source of sorrow. Can sorrow end? Question is slightly different. Because what it's pointing out is that, look, unless you investigate what is this I, which seems to be the cause of all this, there cannot be an ending. So it becomes, this is self-inquiry. This is the whole process of self-knowing. Because the I seems to be the cause of all the problems. In the same way, your second question comes, see, through our education, we are deeply conditioned to think that understanding is of the intellect. But can intellect understand? Because intellect can only recognize and imagine, and recognition and imagination is not understanding. So understanding, perception seems to be at a level which is beyond the intellect. But the intellect can ask questions which can help encourage that and not obstruct that perception and insight.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Harshad bhai, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. We can ask many questions, but what is the state from which a question arises? Because if that question arises either naturally or with a sense of curiosity, then that question itself will create a state in which we can really begin to see something without words. So what is the quality or of the mind which is asking questions? Otherwise, we can keep on.
You lost your voice.
So I have one more question, sir.
Let Harshad bhai finish off, then we'll come back. Yeah.
A question has a value only if it arises from curiosity, and that question is such that it makes the mind stop and really look. That's all I have to say.
So the kind of question you're talking about, Dr. Parekh, is a question that doesn't have a motive. Now, I can only watch whether there is a motive in the question that I'm asking. I can be aware of that motive, right? I can't say that there should be a question without a motive, but I can watch what is motivating me to ask the question and keep watching my motive.
Yeah, thank you. Anandji, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. So we very comfortably and easily say that I should end. I should not be there. But if I observe every split second, it is focusing on its survival. It wants to survive. I'm doing everything in my life to see that it is there. It is very simple to say it should end. Again, I'm asking, what does that end mean? Like I said, life does not exist without suffering. There is pain in life. If I say it should end, I'm talking about life per se. There is pain, there is suffering. My father passed away. There is sorrow and suffering. When I say it should end, the question, what does end mean? The word end. We are caught with that word end. That is what I'm trying to find out, sir. What it means to end. Someone comes and says end. But every split second, I'm protecting it. Right. Even right now, the fact my reaction itself is one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we are not saying I should end. So we can't make such a statement. All we can point out is the I the cause of sorrow? So when you say pain and suffering, are they together? See, the body must have pain. All right. In its nature, when there is deterioration in the body, there must be pain. But is every pain a suffering? Or as somebody put it very nicely, pain is inevitable. Suffering is an optional extra. Right? So does pain mean that I must suffer? This is the challenge. See, we know that what is born has to die. It's a fact, crystal clear in us. But when that death takes place, why does the pain of sorrow come up? That means there is that understanding is not at the where we want it to be. We think we have understood intellectually, we've got it all analyzed, concepts are clear, tree of the understanding is all there, but that is not understanding. And this is one problem that we have, that we think once I have intellectually split something, I have understood. That's the fallacy of our education. Because from a very young age, this is pushed in, right? We don't ever ask, what is that insight of perception where you touch something? And in that touching, you may touch 100 things. You may touch why you are afraid, why there is this craving towards something. Each one is different. One has to watch those knots in oneself. Life gives you that opportunity to watch.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Clemens, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Gopalan talked about why don't we, or rather, why so few of us ask this question: can sorrow end, or can suffering end, fear end, or end, something like this? It may be because we are trained and educated from childhood to escape those things. And we are told since children that this is a human condition. You know, there is no way out. Human beings are, occasionally you will feel afraid, occasionally you will be sad, occasionally this will happen. That is a human condition. So we just take that for granted. And that's my feeling. That's why we never question, can it end? Because we are told, just carry on with it, find a way to minimize it and put up with it and carry on. And then with this, it can never end, because we just accept it as a fact of life and we carry on. So the question never arises. My feeling is mainly because of that. And then with this, I feel education is the most important thing, because in education, we can help the child to learn to question this kind of things, and don't tell them it is a human condition, just put up with it, carry on and find a way to deal with it.
Yeah, that's why if you look at Krishnamurti's entire talks on education, he doesn't talk of academic content, which way you teach, whether you teach standing on your legs or standing on your head, or how you arrange your table. None of that. He only talks of one. The intent of the schools only talks of these questions. Because if you have asked these questions, the rest of life will fall in place. But if you don't ask these questions, whatever other technological education you give is going to be incomplete.
Thank you. Thank you.
And not only incomplete, it will also create problems.
Yes. We have Dinesh, Mr. Dinesh Wagmare. Dinesh ji, please go ahead.
Gopalan sir, I want to just explore. Can a question be without motive? And what do you mean by motive then? Number one, this is my first question. Number two, are the human beings competent enough to talk about death? Because whatever we are talking of death, we are already second-hand persons, as JK says. We can only talk of problems related to our thought and created by thought or related to thought and related to life. But can we really talk about death? Are our intellect and this thing, that instrument is competent enough to talk about death? Yes,
Right.
sir.
So the first question is, can I be aware of my motive? That's it. See, every thought rises because of some motive. Without a motive, it doesn't rise. But can I be aware of the motive behind that thought as it rises, not postmortem analysis, right? Can there be that level of attention? So can we live a life of attention really? That's the first question. The second question is, intellectually, we can ask all these questions. I know this is what I did today, right? I talked about heartbeat, this, I can ask all this. But then at the end of it, even the intellectual question is, so what is death? Is death only in thought? And when outside thought, is there such a thing as death? Is a question that remains. A question remaining unanswered has its own strength, because then it keeps working and possibly it opens the door to insight. Answers stop questioning. So what does it mean to hold a question and just remain with the question without seeking the answer? Or do I want a solution so that I am comfortable, which is what most of the time we are all looking for. So why should every question have an answer in words? Hold the question and see what comes. Just remain with the question.
Thank you. Pradeep, please go ahead.
Yes, I want to address a very, very important issue raised by Anand sometimes back and also some others. When we know, ego is, and also Gopalan said that, I is the suffering. If I is the suffering, if fire burns, I just take my hand out of the fire. I don't put my hand because it burns. If it is pure suffering, then there is no problem, sir. The very fact that I is also a source of 100 times of happiness. All my happiness arises out of I, and all my suffering also arises out of I. That is why I am caught in approach avoidance. The moment suffering is there, I want to get out of it. But moment there's a pleasure, I want attachment. I'm attached to it. Now, then the question is there any solution? I do a little bit of counseling of some people, ashiks, the young romantics caught in the love affairs, and then they're traumatized, and they talk about how horrible suffering their life is and all that. And this is, "Jo main janti preet kiye dukh hoye, jagat dindora peetti, preet na kareo koe." So that kind of a condition of somebody who's been traumatized in love affairs, they say, no more love affairs, please. Now, the problem is we are not able to let go of I is because we are not seeing clearly. The perception is not there. That is what Krishna ji says. The moment you perceive something is dangerous, right now it is giving you sweet, but it is poison. Will you take it? No, because you know it is the poison. But if you don't know, if you see only the sweet, then you will take it. And then poison will trouble you, all kinds of stomachache and everything. But once you have gone through this cycle and you know, no, then again you are not going to touch it. So the problem is there's a lack of clarity of perception of seeing the I along with its suffering and joys. So you have to let go of both. The moment this perception is clear, there's a liberation from Pradeep. There's no liberation from anything else. The liberation has to be from the Pradeep itself. So that perception is the issue. That's it. Thank you.
See, you used 3 words interchangeably in what you said. You used joy, happiness, and pleasure. Are they interchangeable? See, joy, wait, let me explore what I'm trying to say. Joy and happiness are in when it is happening. First time you go to the Himalayas and you see that snow peak over there, something happens. Yeah? You wake up. Huh? Then comes thought saying, I'd like to have it more. And that begins pleasure. So we think pleasure is joy and happiness. Is it? Or joy and happiness is only in that moment of experiencing. Pleasure is the beginning of our problem and suffering.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. I think we have come to the end of the session now. We still have questions. Mr. Jain, can we increase it by 5 minutes? Jain Saab.
Okay, sir, you can do it, but 5
Okay.
minutes only, sir, please.
Okay. So please make it very brief, Mr. Shankar Narayanan and Ravi. Yes.
Sir, you had mentioned that joy or happiness is in the now, in this experiencing. It's not like, it's not a thought product, but isn't it the nature? It's not about being in front of Himalayas or doing something fresh or new. It is what it is. That the happiness and joy is what it is. Possibly, it is not like it needs any external stimulant like a wonderful mountain or a sunrise and all that. Possibly, it is only the me or I coming in which is the issue. And when we say joy or happiness, it is where the I has subsided, including all the senses.
Thank you.
Yes. Correct, sir? Makes sense, sir? I mean,
that's the exact point. That it is not the I which is experiencing happiness. Happiness is there in that instant. An instant later, I rises and say, can we keep it a little longer? Right? That's the beginning of our sorrow. So experiencing is not of the I. That becomes very clear even as we talk about it.
Yes, Ravi, the last question. Ravi from Uttarkashi. Please ask.
Understanding has ing, that means the process, and realization is the completion of it. So can I speed up my understanding the process to realize it as soon as possible?
Completion involves time, doesn't it? I started and I completed it. Why should I know I have completed it? If I am in the process, what makes me say I want to know that I've reached the end of the process?
Thank you. I think we'll take the last question from Anandji. Anandji, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. So when I say suffering and pain, I want to understand it is my suffering or pain or suffering and pain per se. What is happening out there? Also in here. The moment I say mine, I'm at loss. Isn't it so, sir?
Can suffering happen without the sense of me?
It is so limited, isn't it, sir? My pain and my suffering is limited. When the world is on fire, I'm thinking of my house. So can I look at that as a question?
Yeah. So when I say the world is on fire, is the world separate from me? That world is also a creation of my own mind. Therefore, so long as thought is not separate from that thinker, the I, right? And from that I must come all suffering. That doesn't mean that there is no pain. See, in the way the world is today, right? When one animal is food for another, is there pain in that process? So I don't know whether we can theoretically answer these questions, but pain and suffering are not at the same dimension. That much is clear.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Thanks a lot. I think we have come to the end of the session now. And I want to thank Mr. Gopalan for speaking before us today on behalf of the Indore Study Circle. And with these words, we end this session. We'll meet next Sunday. And we have Mr. Rajaram Kudli, who is the next parent of the Value School. So he'll be speaking to us. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dubey sir.
Thank you.
And thank you, Gopalan sir. You are always available to us. Thanks. We can end it.